One of our most successful bits of casting was Oliver Reed, because from the original design of Proximo, he had to create a character who willingly sent people to their death. You know, these gladiators work for him. He had no problems with dispatching them in to fight and die under whatever circumstances would make him a few bucks. So we hired Oliver Reed, and from very early on, he had a charisma that made you forgive him. He's a little bit, has that sort of Jack Nicholson thing where he can do bad things and you still think he's cool.
Well, Ollie, I'd met years ago. I don't think he even remembered, actually. I don't know that he was that busy at the particular point that I called him up.
My agent phoned me up, as they do, and said, Ridley Scott would like you in a movie. They're going to send you the script. And so I opened the bag when it came through the door, and the first thing that slipped out was the sending of this script does not constitute an offer. So I thought, fuck him.
Still the same old vulnerable Ollie, although very, very eccentric.
And then my agent phoned up and said he would like you to read for him. And I thought, I don't read for people. If he wants to see my work, he can see it. You know, there are things that he can run, talk to anybody. When I last made a movie, see some of that. And then I thought again, and I thought, well, if he really does want me to read for him, then I can get a free ticket to London, and I can go and see a show and things like that. So I thought, this is something that, all right, I've never read before. I read once for Richard III, I think, years and years ago. But for Ridley, I'll read. So I went in there, and he was smoking a cigar. He said, do you remember we met 31 years ago when you were doing Oliver? I said, no, I don't remember that. And then he said, right, would you like to read? I said, yeah, sure. He said, better than that. He said, I've got a little studio set up downstairs. And I said, a studio? He said, yes, we got an actor that's going to play the lines. I said, listen, I don't know these lines, and I can't read because I've got these spectacles on. So he said, we'll pretend they're Roman spectacles. So I just read the lines and did a bit of bullshit. And a few days later, he phoned me up and he said, you did very well.
The Emperor knows too much. And as for me, it's too dangerous.
What was thought to be a great idea, they loved him. Absolutely loved him, loved his screen presence, right? Very fantastic, fantastically powerful screen presence.
I always thought that Ridley's favorite character was Proximo. You know, I think that there was something about this gruff businessman, not unmoral, but amoral character who made his living off of the death machine, and yet how somehow inside there was some kind of, you know, ethical person that would come out at the right moment.
Gladiators, I salute you.
It was also fun because he hadn't had a big success in a while. And so everyone around was really looking forward to Oliver Reed being back and Oliver Reed strutting his stuff. And as a matter of fact, the last moment of the movie was designed for him.
Oliver Reed was an absolute joy to work with. He was very silent, very calm, and very studied before his performances. He would christen his costume. He called his skinny trousers his Bambis, because that's how they made his legs look. And he christened his cream jellaba his Wendy, because it looked like Wendy's nightshirt from Peter Pan.
He's absolutely wonderful. He's got all the right frocks on. And when I go to Rome, I shave a bit and clip up a bit more and can show off to my friends. Yeah, he's a wonderful character. I reckon that he's one of the best in the film. But then, you know, if you get involved in something as big as this, you've got to believe that your character can compete with it, because there's a hell of a lot going on around.
Richard Harris used to joke to me saying, you know, he said, our generation means Richard Burton and, as you would call them in those days, the shit kickers. Plenty of drinking, millions of cigarettes, lots of brandy. They'd start in the morning, you know. And that was part, I think in those days it was perceived as being the romantic part of doing the job.
I suppose I began to get myself a reputation of being a bit of a Richard Harris. and a bit of a Richard Burton and a bit of a Peter O'Toole. But they were the senior ones, and I was, still sitting watching the game of cricket when they were in the pavilion batting. And so things go in cycles, and so that worries people, whether I do it in my own time, which I must admit, sometimes I make a nuisance of myself in my own time. Sometimes those things are thrust upon me, but I try not to do it in filmmakers' times.
I'd seen him in D.H. Lawrence movies, from the 60s and 70s, and he was just like this extraordinary actor. And to also know that, another guy was like, half crazy, half mad, and was incredibly interesting because of that, and again carried that tension with him onto the stage. He was truly a wonderful actor, but also, I think, literally burning the candle at both ends, since day one.
For the memory of your ancestors.
Oliver had vowed to Ridley that he would not drink during the production. I mean, weekends, when he's in his own time, whatever. And he kept his vow. He would show up every day with his lines nailed. And he never drank during production. I liked Oliver. He was, as a kid, he was one of my heroes. I saw him in a lot of films, and, he had sort of fallen on, hard times, I guess. A lot of the British actors had. There wasn't so much call for them.
Who am I to trust?
I remember it was a Friday, and we were watching the dailies, I believe, of his scene with Maximus, where he talks about being freed by Marcus Aurelius. And Maximus says, I too want to stand before the emperor, meaning something very different. And we were watching daily at the screening room at DreamWorks, and it was over, and we had this conversation about, my God, the world's going to rediscover Oliver Reed. I mean, it's just the most amazing thing. He was pitch perfect, fascinating. You couldn't keep your eyes off of him.
He was great working with him, but it was like quick. You do it in 2 or 3. That's it. You got to get it in 2 or 3. He'd get bad-tempered, and he'd get bad-tempered with himself, saying, oh, damn it, he couldn't remember. But he was good. You get him online for like 3, and that was it. So you better walk in knowing exactly what you want. Because you're going to get that. You're going to get his persona on screen.
Congratulations, General. You've got very persuasive friends.
I think it was a Sunday morning, and I was out checking something. I'd been on the road looking for some location, I think, and they said that I've got a big problem, you got to come back.
I woke up and I got ready to go to work, 6 in the morning, Monday morning, and there's a picture of Oliver on them with the Maltese talking head newscaster saying something. I said, oh, that's interesting.
I just returned from Malta to Los Angeles, and I still remember very vividly. I was exhausted. I went into my bedroom where the answer machine is, and I saw 5 messages blinking, blinking, blinking. The first one was from DreamWorks Urgent, so I knew something terrible had happened. And, I heard Oliver Reed had died.
It was shocking. I mean, I absolutely couldn't believe it. He dropped down dead in the morning. Actually, fortunately, in a funny kind of way, he was doing his Sunday morning ritual, which was having a couple of beers, and he just had a heart attack.
It was tragic on so many levels. Again, a huge one of which is just a guy thriving and just about to have a complete rebirth with the public. And I think really feeling his oats in a great way.
And as he said, he would be pissed off because he hadn't finished the movie. But there's great sadness to it. But, actually, I can think of worse ways of going.
When I was a kid, the greatest Danish actor, died on stage. And everyone in Denmark agreed that was the way he wanted to go. And is there any better way for an actor to go than being in the middle of what they love doing?
When he died, there were 2 effects. One, it was a real tragedy, obviously. I was back in the States. I heard about it. I couldn't believe it. I just left Malta in Valletta, where he had died in Valletta. And my son, who was, I think, 10 or 8 at the time, loved him because he looked like Santa Claus, and he just loved Oliver. That was rough for him. And there were 2 choices. pragmatically. One is to hit the insurance company up to reshoot everything he did. And the other was to try to get through, and there's actually an ironic twist here. The irony is one of the things that was left over from the script that I didn't like, from one of the drafts that I did not like, was that Oliver lived. So everything had defaulted to basically what you saw in the movie, except they still had Oliver living, which made no sense to me at all. I mean, what's this guy gonna do? He's one of the great tragic heroes of this movie. So when he died, they defaulted back to him dying too, because they did not have really the capability of having him continue on in the movie.
I knew he died because 2 hours after he died, I was on a plane back to Malta. I had signed off. I thought I was finished. And there was still 3 weeks shooting to go. And finally my work was over, and I'd come home and my family was embracing me, and the phone rang, and it was Doug, to say, I'm very sorry to say that Oliver has just died. And the whole ending is screwed. And we've got to create a completely new ending. Get on a plane.
Walter Parks and I headed back to Malta. We had Bill, who lives in London, meet us there.
Went from the airport at Malta straight to the cutting room, where Pietro had pulled out all the outtakes that had Oliver in it.
Your first reaction is kind of a human reaction, because he was a lovely man, and you saw this artist kind of coming back into the fold. But really quickly, you then start thinking about, oh my God, what does this mean to the movie? And you start trying to do the math, because you're thinking, well, wait a minute, we haven't finished him. In fact, there's a key story moment that we haven't done yet, that we actually don't have a way to get Maximus out of the prison.
The only time I thought I saw Ridley Scott really look vulnerable was when we sat in the meeting with the insurance adjuster. And one of the possibilities was to basically go back to Morocco and go back through most of what we had shot with another actor. The insurance company would have had to eat some extraordinary sum, like $26 million. But who knew if we could even get the hotels, rebuild the locations. And, you kind of pace yourself on a big movie. The idea of sort of doing a huge portion of it again is just unbearable. And another option was there some way to complete Oliver Reed's performance?
What are we going to do? I mean, Oliver Reed just created a fantastic character. We all loved him, we all loved the presence, from the first time we see him in Morocco. He died 3 weeks before the end of principal photography, and now we're still missing some scenes in terms of, resolving or closing this character's storyline.
There was one particular story problem. In the script, Maximus went to Proximo and basically said, will you help me get out? And he says, why should I help you? Why do I want to bring down Commodus? He makes me rich. And he basically says, no, I'm not going to help you. There was then a subsequent scene or two in which they had another encounter where he then did convince Proximo, Oliver Reed's character, to help him. And that scene had never been shot. I remembered that there was this great shot of Oliver Reed watching, the tail end of his shot, watching Maximus leave the room, just kind of looking at him like this. So I thought, if we were to go back and shoot another bit of Maximus and gave him a line that connected to Proximo's past, the story that he in fact had once stood before Marcus Aurelius and in fact had gotten his freedom from him. So we came up with a line.
You killed the man who set you free.
The magic of film is such is that after that line, if you cut back to the reaction shot of Ollie's, where he's just looking at him, it changes everything. You read his reaction shot as, oh my God, that's right. And suddenly you open up the possibility that he will now do the right thing.
If a main character dies, he has to be seen to die. You can't have him, people say, oh, by the way, he's dead now.
So we had to sit down and actually work through it, saying, well, if he's actually assassinated, then we can see him do this last act of generosity and give the keys to Russell to get him out.
We need to somehow for this character to redeem himself. Yes, he's a rascal, he's a businessman, he thinks for his own well-being before anybody else, but at least we wanted to have him beat with some redeeming quality for him.
But he was still a cynic. at the point that he died. So we had to build a completely new sequence in which he did a noble act.
But how do we do that? Do we just use a double? You know, well, you can't have a whole scene just with a double. You can have a double just passing the frame.
I'd love to say that that I figured it all out, but by the time I got there, really, Pietro had figured it all out. And he just turned to me and said, John, I just need to know if we can do this.
We said, well, we can't just use double. Maybe we can use double for certain parts of recreating certain scenes. What about using Proximo? Could we do that? Could we steal shots? Before the meeting, I went and looked at all the close-ups, all the medium shots, all the long shots of Oliver Reed that he had, and I said, well, how could we use this shot, you know? How could we, well, he has to walk towards us, and you know, we had some kind of idea of how to structure the scene. Well, he's packing, but well, that could be somebody from, that could be a double, you know, from the back. Well, he's gonna be killed, you know. Well, we could use the double from the back, but then we need to see the close-up. So there were a lot of logistical problems, but we started to emerge with, or suggestions with, and say, well, you know, we could use this close-up from the arena. He's looking. Well, maybe he's looking at the gate. Well, he's not dressed the same way. He has different clothes. It's daylight. It's not night. We have to change his clothes. And you know, we asked John, "You think we could do this?" Yeah, I think it's okay. We can put the head on top of the body. He says, well, you know, it's like, is it actually going to work? It's going to look fake. You have to make it real. You don't want to just, you know, do it and not sell it.
I could see the seeds of the logic that they had set up was really great. And I said, yeah, this is doable. When the guy walks across the compound, we even had to do some sleeving of the double walking and putting Oliver's head and neck inside that. And the hardest thing was certainly doing the facial hair because he had shaved. You know, he had a full beard in the other scenes and he had shaved early, so we had to do some patching of skin and whatnot.
So we created a new little sequence in which you see him realizing that if he goes to free Maximus from his cell under the eye of the Praetorians, he will be killed.
We use Oliver Reed, you know, as a close-up, handing it to him. But he says, you know, but we have to have him say something. What could he say? I mean, it's like to have a scene, right? So we looked back in one scene in the bedroom where Proximo goes to Maximus and he says, you know, you win the crowd and you'll win your freedom. So he said, well, the key word there is freedom. I could use just the freedom, right, part of it. But we could have a different sentence over his back, which could be the double, saying, you've won your freedom, and hands him the keys. You know, close up, a double, handing him the keys. Oh, yeah, that would be good. But, you know, his beard is different. We have to shave his beard digitally.
Because his beard was different, we actually changed his facial hair, put him into new scenes that we shot when we shot the actual scene with Russell, which were just blank backgrounds. And on the overs, we shot those with a double, you know, talking to Russell.
Everything is prepared.
And really had me down on the set, and we were shooting the scene. You know, he says, "Well, you know exactly what composite. You know, just come by, just in case." So Russell was looking at that, and he says, "Well, over the shoulder. He's going to talk from a different take. Let me see that take." You know, so we showed it to Russell, and I said, "So he's going to say freedom." Yeah, I guess, but
just to lean forward on the line.
Yeah, I don't think you need to. I think because we'll do that on you, right? You could have a little acknowledgement of that lean, like come forward about, to make that little move half an inch.
Okay.
This is also collaboration. He says, "Well, shouldn't I say something to him? You know, I mean, it's like." And we said, "Yeah, sure. What do you want to say to him? You know?" I said, "I don't know." So, well, it came up on the spot. You know, are you in danger of becoming a good man? And I said, "Yeah, that's good. That could work."
It seems you have won your freedom.
Proximo, are you in danger of becoming a good man?
But how do we end the scene? You know, if you say that, I still need a reaction shot of Oliver Reed. So we went back to the take, to the daily, of where he said the line "freedom," and we saw that as he exits the camera, he goes, "Huh." I said, "Oh, that's it. That's perfect. We could use that as the button at the end of the scene." And so, with everybody's collaboration, we created a scene.
Are you in danger of becoming a good man?
He then walks away. Then he has to be killed. So the body double walks upstairs, sits down, knowing now that they're coming for him as soon as they get those gates down. Then the rest you can shoot quite easily. Stomp, 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 along come the Praetorians. They're going to kill him because he defied them. There he is sitting with his back to us. That's a body double. But you need one shot of the real Oliver Reed before he dies.
Early on in the movie, Maximus confronts Proximo about the madness in the arena, and he points out to the sound of the cheering. He says, "This is not what Marcus Aurelius, stood for." And Proximo says, "But he's dead. What difference does it make? We poor mortals are just shadows and dust."
We mortals are but shadows and dust.
Marcus Aurelius liveth within dream.
Shadows and dust, Maximus.
And in one take, Ollie, for reasons I'll never know, maybe Ridley just didn't say cut, or they just kept him running, and just these things happen. He took this deep breath and he said, "Shadows and dust." He kind of looked, in fact, I think he looked at the heavens.
Shadows and dust.
So I said, that. Just have him say that. It'll feel like a repeat. It'll feel like he's saying, all my life, and it's him, it's the real guy.
And then as you see the intercut with the Praetorian coming up the stairs, you see them come to the back, which is a digital shot. We actually cut out a piece of Oliver Reed. We cut him out from the shot that was earlier at the Colosseum, and as they're raising their daggers to kill him, he takes this breath and he says,
"Shadows and dust."
By moving, it felt like a callback, like it was actually part of the fabric of the storytelling, but in fact, it was just patched together.
We were about 3 weeks from the end with a fairly important piece for him, where he would be the one at the end who would do what Jaimon did. He was going to walk in that arena, bury the sword the wooden sword, which was given to him, which gave him his freedom.
He said, well, how are we going to end the movie since Proximo's not going to plant the sword? And there again, with the writer, with Ridley, he said, we should maybe think really of Juba, of Jaimon. He was close to him, and carry back the idea from the roof, saying, seeing this, the symbols of the family buried in the sand and saying, not yet, I'll see you, but not yet. So that's the kind of magic and things that are unpredictable. But, when everybody has the best interest in mind for the film, and there is excitement and energy and joy in what you do, great things can happen.
I think Ridley wanted to maintain everything that Oliver had already done, because it was so good that he didn't want to have to throw it away and do somebody else.
We kind of resurrected him and stayed true to his character. And we didn't do any, fancy tricks except, say, is it ethically correct to digitally recreate the scene? It's like, it is him. He just said it somewhere else, but with anything in film, if it's the image, if it's the sound, you do manipulate.
All we were doing is completing a great performance that Oliver had given.
I just think he was having a ball when he went out, and I kind of thought about that. And so I was really sad and shocked, but I also felt somehow that that's exactly what he would have wanted.
He enjoyed his work, obviously, loved to get himself together. Could never get inside his head, actually. He was very kind of private in that respect. He was what he was, and he did what he did, and that was it. I knew down the line I would have done, with or without the CGI assistance. I still thought the story, the world, and creating the world was the biggest challenge of all.
Our job for visual effects on Gladiator was to deliver the big idea. When the movie needed to breathe and be big, it was always a visual effects shot.
On one hand, we have very old-fashioned filmmaking sensibilities and values, right? But on top of that, you have the absolute cutting edge of contemporary computer graphic and imagery that's going to be applied to what you actually see is then, therefore, increased by 5.
I first took a look at the script and said, what are the big beats? And confirmed them with Ridley. And then we just got into like, okay, conceptually, I asked Ridley, what do you want the audience to think in a perfect world when they leave this movie about the movie and about the visual effects in the movie? And he said, I want them to feel like they've sort of seen a documentary of Rome. I want it to be highly real.
Where I enjoy myself most, I think, is creating worlds. Sometimes new worlds, i.e. science fiction, or recreating worlds which is historical. History, your challenge really is to, see how accurate you can be in that process. And so it's to do with research and, of course, choosing the right people. It's still down to the artistry of those who are recreating that and getting it looking real. And where you can smell the city and you can feel that the costume is real and is correct and is lived in. I only need, when I'm in the German front, let's say, well, quite a few, 1,000 to 1,500 troops against 800 Germans, and then I'm able to, with CGI, again, the computer, to generate a battlefield which looks like there could be between 5,000 and 10,000, 12,000 troops there. In the CGI terms, you call it tiling, where I take that group here of, let's say, 1,000, and I can reclone them 6 times to make 6,000, and actually have them moving across the ground and through the fire and up the hill, and to meet the Germans, and it all looks totally real.
If you look at the color theme of the movie starts to be very blue. And I remember Ridley said to me once, he goes, it's like, I want this to be blue. The only yellow thing I want in Germany is the fire. And what we were trying to sell in the German battle is the overwhelming technological superiority of the Roman forces. And the story concept was that they'd have these scorpions, which were like crossbows the size of Volkswagens, and they had catapults. And the catapults would shoot incendiary bombs, basically clay pots filled with oil that would, be like, a Roman version of a Molotov cocktail. We had built 1 or 2 catapults and 1 or 2 scorpions, and they were really big and unwieldy, and it was a very muddy situation. So not only did we have to repeat those, we had to repeat our armies as well, because dealing with crowds is really quite time-consumptive and somewhat unwieldy. So in the Roman battle, we made things suitably large and detailed and sold the idea of technological superiority. So whenever there would be arrows going, there would be like thousands of arrows. I know we had one big shot from Marcus Aurelius's point of view, and that was a very interesting shot because Gladiator had basically no motion control, because I knew that Terry Needham would kill me if I brought motion control on the set, because he likes to work fast and make things happen, and motion control tends to take a lot of time. So we approached that big wide shot in a very interesting fashion. We shot 3 locked off VistaVision tiles, 1 from the left side of the battlefield, 1 from the center of the battlefield, 1 from the right side of the battlefield. We blueprinted all our lenses, so we know what lens distortion was in any lens. And so mathematically, we took out the lens distortion, sewed together the 3 tiles, and then added tons of virtual information on top of it, like digitally replicating and reproducing the catapults and the scorpions, digital arrows, digital fireballs, shot locked off plates of Neil's Corbolt's fire going in the background, made all these things work, had our army here, army here, army here, made them all seam together, march together, and then we pushed into this big pan tile and did a moving POV going through with everything going off in order. So to make, it's like you start on this side and it's like fire, 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 fire. And then right when you get to the end of the firing, the background goes explode, 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 while all these people are all still rushing forward. To get that to work in a motion control shot would be a nightmare, because you would have to, in time signature, make everything go at the right time. but because we approached it as a post-process, we could slide all the elements until they worked, reproduce elements that we needed to do, and then right at the right point, have the perfect pan to catch it. Whenever I ask him what a shot should be like, he would always be drawing, and he'd say the shot before it's like this, and this is the shot, and the shot after it's like this, and this is how it sort of fits together in this big theme that we're trying to sell. Here is a picture of one of Ridley's many drawings that he would do on the set and say, this is how I envision the shot to be. This is for the Road to Rome. And this, we were looking out, actually, there's a harbor in here. So what he said, well, what if we take away the harbor and put in a valley? And in essence, that's exactly what we've done here. This is a valley from Malta. This is the walls of Malta from the actual city. And then back up in here is city that we built, the city of Rome. It just made my job more straightforward because instead of trying to search for what we were supposed to be doing, we would spend our time doing what we're supposed to be doing and trying to make it as good as it could be. He would draw these things up and they'd say, do you want this? And I'd go, what, are you crazy? Yeah, of course I want it. And then I'd go back and I'd say, okay, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it. And so the people on the line working on the computers would not only understand what we're doing, but why we're doing it.
A project like this is a real challenge, a challenge to realise the vision, Ridley's vision, DreamWorks' vision, of the city of Rome, the atmosphere of Rome, the people of Rome, none of which exist anymore. The trick and the challenge is to create invisible effects. So what we've done is create a Rome that didn't exist by 3D, 2D combinations of both. Now that's the difficulty. It's creating a believable city without being an obvious set extension in 3D or a matte painting or whatever.
We had a way to pre-visualize the digital sets and the real sets through the camera at the time we were shooting them. And then in pre-pro, I worked with Emil because I said, well, he's going to want to move the camera. He's never going to just say block. So actually, when we showed it to Ridley, he said, well, what happens if I move the camera? I said, well, move the camera. And he moved the camera, and the digital set and the real set moved together, and he goes, whoa, this is fantastic. So he actually lined up what he wanted, and then we looked at it, and he said, okay, that's it, and we took off and shot it. So Ridley would work with first unit of Joaquin and Connie entering in, and we extended those shots, and we took the main street, or what we referred to Main Street or Oxford Street at Malta, was basically this main corridor down, and there was only one story of old ruin that Arthur addressed, and then we added, a second story, and top stuff with furrowing banners and rose petals flying in the air, and duplicated the crowd out. And then we took the stuff that first unit had shot with the widest lens in the box from the highest crane we had, and then we reduced that down. At the same time, Alex Witt was shooting second unit to get different things for the entrance in and crowd shots and people cheering. And at the same time, I was shooting different stuff. Like I took, we had built this eagle that was about 5 feet across, and it was for the set at the palace. So I shot the eagle. Then I shot this moving through under a big arch that we had done with stunt guys up on top. We needed stunt guys because it was very precarious up there, and they were cheering. And then I went back and sized up the eagle with the same lens and same angle, and I took this 5-foot eagle and made it 35 feet and put it up behind the people cheering. And we just basically went, and I tried to use what Arthur had built as much as possible and rephotograph it, because again, I come from being a cameraman. I like to approach things in a 2D world first before I build them in 3D. In fact, the big shot of the people coming up with the foreground people, waiting for them, that's a shot we shot in the actual Colosseum set where we reduced the people. We built the arena that was like the square in the Vatican. We built that in CG with some matte painting, and then we went and shot hill towns in the south of France as the hills of Rome. Then we went and nipped neoclassical architecture from London and put them back in there with additional three-dimensional elements. I asked Terry Needham once in pre-pro, I said, well, would there be a lot of dust, there? And he just looked at me and he said, it's a Ridley Scott movie, John. It's like, you idiot, you know. Of course, there'll be tons of dust. And also it will always be backlit. So, I mean, we took a look at basically how the shadows were falling, but we always knew that we'd be designing it in, you know, backlight to backlight. And just because it's the type of thing that it's really beautiful, and we know that he likes it. As far as light and shadow, we would always just take a look at knowing that it would be a heavy backlight and always either shoot elements or recreate elements inside the computer, either through matte painting or through volume renders or whatever, to give us that whole shaft of light through a slight atmosphere back, painting big highlight and shadow. And it would, again, be all dictated by the hole cutter, which was the Valerium. You know, because the Valerium was a big story point that really wanted to get through to people. Like, this is a retractable roof. I mean, this is like a modern day big business sports, only it was done back in the 1st century and before. The Colosseum is 3 stories tall, okay? And we built 1/2 of 1 story. And so John Math, over that 1/2 of 1 story, he actually draped a hole cutter Valerium that would cast light on that 1/2 of 1 story as if it were 3 stories up. And then we basically took out everything above that story, recreated a 3D extension for the rest of the Colosseum, a 3-dimensional and CGI, 3D CGI Valerium, and then we lit to match the stripes that he had already put into the on-set population. And then, of course, because we shot individuals on individual cards actually shot them on video because the resolution was strong enough by the time we reduced it to fit in. We shot them in hard key light and in soft light. So when they were in open shadows, they would look correct. And when they were in hard key light, they would be appropriately lit.
We built what we had to build. So we built probably just over 50% of the Colosseum. I was then able to shoot in that and then top that up with CGI and put people, and it just looks real. And of course, I built enough so I can do reverses, so I can do the full 360.
When we were talking about bringing the Gladiators out, I said, okay, Rid, if you were back in Rome, let's just, for instance, if you could go back in Rome with the full film crew, how would you cover that shot? If it really existed, if it weren't a visual effect. And he said, well, gee, if I did that, I think I'd do a huge Steadicam move around and just not cut away. Right when you think that you were going to cut away because it was a process shot, I just keep going, right? And I said, well, we can do that. It won't be cheap, but we can do it. And I looked at the guys from the mill and they went, yeah, I think we can do it. And they were tremendously game guys, and we all got on that bandwagon. And I think conceptually, if you do that and you sell that you're in the Colosseum, and right when the audience would think that you'd cut away, you didn't cut away. It's sort of like knocking out the bully in the schoolyard, you know? I mean, you've got him for the whole rest of the movie.
You see the whole vista, you see the whole sweep around the arena, and for us, that was an extraordinarily challenging shot. We have to track the shot so that we can then build and extend in 3D the stadium, add all the crowd and finish the whole of the stadium off. Plus we have all the people in front of the camera who we have to remove and paint back. That was a very, very difficult shot to achieve and took a very long time.
So I've got 5 stories going up in front of us. Once we cut round here, we can adjust. If they were that close coming out, we can adjust, come out like that, and come out like that, and come out like that.
Just give him a little space.
Because he's what needs to get between anyway. Is that all right?
Yeah, it'd be great. It'd be great if there was a little spacing on.
We will.
Okay.
We will. Once they get out here, the key is for them to, is to start to separate a little bit with a view to getting back in together out there. So if they naturally separate just by...
They do anyway.
Yeah.
Spread early.
Spread
early. Good.
Should we do it then?
Yeah, let's do it. 1, 2.
Menz, can you keep up with his action to be able to do the 360 on that?
We're going to have to slow it down for my camera, but it'll hopefully be all right.
Yeah. All right. This is a rough pre-visualization for what we call the 360-degree Steadicam shot in the Carthage battle. This is the rough pre-visualization when Ridley said, well, let's do it as a Steadicam move. We showed him what it might look like. And the red is the set,
Okay, so now he's off the set. This is all would be CG extension straight up. As you come around here, again, the red part as you come around is the real set. So now we're coming back onto the real set just for a moment here, looking back up. So what we did here is this is a rough on it. First, we worked out the move in the computer. Then we knew, because we worked out the move in the computer, we knew we had a computer model of what was going to be built in Malta. So we knew how much would be on set and how much would be offset. Okay, so this is what we really shot when we were there. We had a real sunshade out to go over part of the crowd. Now we're completely off the set. Now we're coming back onto the set, but there's only a partial set there. So as you can see, the amount of stuff that's not there is fairly large. We're looking right into, for the most part, a Coliseum that doesn't exist, except in the mind of a director and the guts of a computer someplace. Then we went back in, we created our set extensions to the Coliseum to have the Coliseum go all the way up, including the Valerium, and then we put people into the Coliseum, and this is very close to the finished product.
I don't think anything became perhaps easier than we thought, unfortunately. I think everything was at least as difficult as we thought. Shots like the overhead flyover, which was commonly known as the blimp shot, was incredibly difficult, incredibly time-consuming.
We shot the original plate, shooting one half of one floor of the Coliseum with no Valerium, with 1,000 extras, basically 600 outside, 400 inside. And I never have ever seen 1,000 people look less impressive. It looked like 10 people, right? And we ended up really replacing almost everything except the ground. But I'm always in favor, especially when you're shooting a big CG shot like that, of always shooting a real plate, because it really tells you what the key to fill relationships are and how the light is really working. And we added the people, added, tens of thousands of people streaming in, built up the buildings, put people on top of the buildings, people in the buildings, built the Coliseum, put people inside the arches of the Coliseum looking out, because that was a big thing when we talked about the Coliseum. What would the people inside be doing? Well, they'd be looking out down to the people down on the ground. So they were put in. Then we built the Valerium, built out the Valerium. Then we even put in people on top of the Valerium arming and winching, right? Then we put people inside that, built the rest of the Coliseum, put people inside the Coliseum, and recreated the fight.
The process of putting a shot together can and could go on forever and ever. I mean, you can finesse and finesse and finesse, and it should be pixel perfect. The supervisors, John Nelson, Rob Harvey, and Tim Burke from Mill Film, have a lot of say in how far we take a shot, but ultimately it's Ridley. We want to make the shot perfect for Ridley, and Ridley has the final say if we should stop or not. But as a producer, of course, every producer knows that there is a fine line between going on forever and, spending millions of pounds on a shot.
We had an $8 million budget on Gladiator for visual effects, and I think we came in at 8.3 or 8.4 or something like that, and all those were approved overages that the studio really wanted, and we were. I tell people how much money we spent on that movie, and they're shocked, because we added a tremendous amount to the picture. I think the three biggest shots in Gladiator certainly are the German battle fight, which Marcus's POV pans left to right, and bringing them out into the Coliseum, and the blimp shot going over the top. And those are big shots that they look real. They don't look like CG. And I'm very proud of them, and I think it's one of the many ways where we sort of delivered our prime directive, which is to make the big idea sort of approachable and accessible to modern audiences, because it's like Rome is such a big idea. What somebody once told me, it's like the glory that was once Rome. It's big and massive, impressive, and those shots really worked into the puzzle to try to deliver the goods.
The feeling about the movie was always that the default position would be we'd have a really cool action movie, enough teenage boys would pay for the movie to break even.
We thought it would be a big film, but we didn't really expect it to be a worldwide global phenomenon. I think the universality of appeal it had was surprising. Nobody really knew that it would be so popular.
In the first test screening, the audience was quiet all the way through. And there's no one who's not sweaty when you've worked that hard that long, and it's hard not to project your fears onto the silence. Every now and then you'd hear some reaction, you'd think, boy, they sure seem with it. And occasionally there'd be some moment. Laughter is a great way to tell when they're with it. Started noticing on little things, the tiniest jokes that Juba and Maximus might make. The end, thunderous applause, but really the most important thing from that first test screening, by far the most important thing, was women liked it as much as men. And that was when we knew we had a chance at the movie really having a great life.
I remember when we saw Ridley's first cut, you know, the movie was there. I mean, there was much work to be done, but the movie was there. And what was surprising was that you cried at the end of it. I mean, that for all of the spectacle and the action, it really was emotional and very intimate and really made good on its promise of being a story about a man who wanted really nothing more than to go home.
Well, the first reaction was fantastic. That was it. I think they knew they had a big one right there. And after that was just minutiae. What about this? What about that? I said, well, we tried that, we tried that. Do we really need Commodus hacking his father's head on a marble bust, which will now be back in the movie, because that was one of my favorite little bits on him.
I was really upset at first because all the intrigue scenes had been cut out.
There was a nice scene between Gracchus and Lucilla, kind of a conspiratorial scene. That was nice in terms of you know, seeing the kind of behind-the-scene politics. Obviously, it was taking away again from the main storyline, but it was a beautiful set, and you could see Lucilla's character, you know, and we took it out because we felt that maybe it's better to not know exactly where she stands.
And also a version of the prison scene that Russell and I had shot first was, I felt, infinitely better than the one that's there.
My son was innocent.
So is mine. Some of those things I was really disappointed in not being there. And it's like, I think all actors have this personal relationship to a script. And you want that relationship that you have with the script to be on the screen. And if anything is missing, at least in my case, if anything is missing, I'm like, what? They stole it. They took it away from me.
The first time you see a movie, if you work on it, you go, oh, they've used that bit. Well, where's that? I was standing over there. That was the day that Russell was pissed off. Well, that was the day that Edie turned up late. That was the day the guy was rude. That was the day, you know, the first time you see a movie. And then really I enjoy it the second time, I think, because then I sort of let go of all my memories and things.
I saw I suppose it would have been a fine cut pre-music, and I found it very good, but wasn't quite working, but everybody knew it wasn't quite working.
I had thought from the beginning, and I remember having this conversation with Bill Nicholson, if this movie were done right, it would be taken seriously. And I think Bill thought, well, you know, I've come on to do some work here, I'm not sure, but, or I think he was like patting me, sure, David.
Then I saw it in its final form here in London, and I was completely astounded. And I, of course, for the first time I was seeing the music, which has an immense role to play in this film, electrifying music. And of course, the cut was just working like a dream. I mean, you would have thought there'd never been any problems. It moved me so much that I thought, this is it, this is going to be huge. And that's because I think people go to the cinema for emotion. And if you can manage to achieve that, it's very difficult. If you can manage to achieve that, people will return and return and return. And I was astounded by how emotional it was.
When I finally saw the movie, which was at a screening while we were shooting Hannibal, Ridley showed it to us in Florence, and so nearly all the team were there, which was extraordinary. I don't think I'd spent much of my time watching it with my mouth shut.
I mean, I remember being in Italy with Ridley at the very end, and fucking shouting at people, and people getting bollocked, and and the stump, a hand going through the corner. And what the fuck's this about? Anyway, get out the fucking way. We're shooting. Fuck off. Where are you? Let's go. And all that kind of energy. And then you see the movie, and went, fuck me. That's beautiful.
The movie came out, and the first thing that happened was it erupted on the scene. This big action movie with a soul. By the second week, we were 40% women. Everybody was worried because there wasn't a conventional love story that women won't come. Please, everybody, make note. If you have a great movie, people will come.
Slow start. I think, what was it, May the 5th, so we had a $35 million opening weekend, which is not bad. I think they had wanted more. We had very good marketing. I think what they figured is it's going to stay in position. It goes from 1 to, I think we got 1 or 2 the first 2 weeks, then went to 2, 3, but then it can chug along at number 3 for weeks, which is what you want. Then you start going out into Europe. I think you've got to come out at the right moment so that they remember, because there's so many films now designed to come out at Oscar time that you can easily get forgotten if you came out previous year in March, or which is what we did. We came out May 5th, so we were kind of a bit late.
But then suddenly, as the movies began stacking up against us that year, we began being taken very seriously. But I still thought, well, this will be fun to ride this, but we'll probably won't win anything. And then we won the Golden Globe. And I returned to Doug and I went, shit, we won.
You get killed for ever complaining about the 300 award dinners that you have to go to with a movie that's doing well. What is true, it's exhausting, because each one's incredibly stressful. Each one, you put on your tuxedo, and you go, and you're kind of nervous. Somewhere, you better have a speech in your pocket if you get lucky. And then this amazing thing happened, which is each one of those dinners, we won.
Then we began realizing the potential of this movie on another level. And so we were nominated for, we won the BAFTA, the Best Picture. I was nominated for Screenplay, but didn't win for BAFTA. We were then nominated for Academy Award. And we did the screenings where you invite Academy members in, and you go and you talk. And people are passionate about the movie.
We all know that it's kind of luck. Nevertheless, you can't get around the fact that you feel this is the respect of your peers, because that's how the Oscars work. I mean, it's brilliant. You are voted for by the people in the business.
Then you get nominated. Then the tension really starts rising. And the only way I would break it is I started running so much. I would run every time I was nervous, and I was up to about 3 miles, 4 miles a day. Because I'd run 3 or 4 times, and I'd just go and run. And I'd go, good grief, what am I going to do if I win? I'm going to have to get up and say something. And while I would run, I'd run with a stopwatch, and I'd sort of try to figure out what I would say. And I think these people at the Santa Monica College thought I was like this babbling crazy man, because I'd be running around with my stopwatch.
I was extremely knocked out to be nominated, and I thought it was wonderful for all my team, really, that the costume department had got the recognition.
As we got nearer that night, I was trying to stay calm, because if we did win, you got to go up and give a speech. I was just trying to keep it all in perspective. And what's really tough is that everyone you bumped into would say, boy, if you win, you'll be talking to a few billion people. And right away it goes, oh no, if we win, that's something.
The thing about an Oscar, is because I've been there sitting in that hot seat 3 times. The terrible thing about that is if you win, there's that scary thing where you got to get up, and I really don't like doing that. So there's always this immediate relief when you don't win, with a little burst of, then you go and have a drink and recover later.
You realize at that point why they have a comic that is really good at the Oscars, because they have people there that are like this, like, really, really, really nervous. And then you're either going to be really happy or really sad. And fortunately for us, we were really happy. Although I think a lot of other people should have won. I mean, personally, I think Hans Zimmer and Lisa Gerrard's music was fantastic, should have won. Certainly, I thought Ridley should have won.
I don't know how a film wins Best Film, and the director doesn't get Best Director. That doesn't make any sense at all.
I cannot believe he didn't win. I'm not trying to put anybody else down, but what that man put into that film. And as Russell said when he got up, he owed his Oscar to one man, that was Ridley. I mean, it's okay to have a great script, but that movie needed one director, and that was Ridley Scott. Otherwise, it would not have been the same. And you don't know that till you start working on it and you start seeing what he's doing. When you get the footage back from the German front, and it is realistic, like All Quiet on the Western Front, you feel the dirt, then you understand this man's vision.
With Ridley losing Best Director, the night really seemed up for grabs.
And the Oscar goes to Gladiator. Douglas Wick, David Franzoni, and Bruno Callisto.
And then we won Best Picture. And I think I was just at that point kind of numb with some idea of, oh, I got to get through this speech. You know, I got to get up there. There's a lot of people to thank. I really want to make sure that I do them justice.
Great dreaming. Walter Parks and Laurie MacDonald, you swooped in on your chariot and ran over everything and everybody in your way. Ridley Scott, you invaded 3 continents with your tireless perfectionism.
Strength and honor.
Just getting there was a roller coaster ride, and you're made to feel like a fairy princess. And I never had any hope at all. So I was completely numb when it actually happened.
Kind of like it's unbelievable and pinch me and make sure this is really happening. This is the stuff that dreams are made of. It's amazing.
How's that feel?
Heavy, but I'll carry it. It's okay. I'd see Walter and Laurie come down and we'd say, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Then we'd win one, we're back. Then we'd lose a few, we're in trouble.
Well, we could predict it a half hour before it happened.
Yes.
I mean, literally, we were so up and down over the course of the award show that we had no idea.
Yeah, and with all the early talk about it being not a great year for movies, I think they ended up with such a strong group.
We were reliving the Roman Empire, yeah, no question about it, but it was worth it.
The whole thing is such a giant undertaking, and so I'm very happy that it got Best Film, because in a way that's the true reflection, you know. It reflects everybody's work, which is really nice, and I'm very happy for Russell.
It's an interesting and different experience to be on a winning side. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great for everybody. Thanks.
I just remember, celebrating with Russell Crowe. He had an after party. It was great. Drink a lot of champagne. But I had to leave the next morning. The car was waiting to pick me up at 5. Takes me out to Burbank Airport. And Ridley and Branko are already there. And Ridley says, "You look really bad. You look sick." I was not feeling too well. But the amazing thing was that Ridley, in the morning, was writing. He was making notes on Black Hawk Down. Unbelievable, the energy and the stamina. We stopped in Bangor, Maine to refuel and then went back to Morocco.
We seem to have revived a genre that had almost become extinct. I think the trend that followed was to reintroduce a whole wave of historical period films that had previously been ignored because of people's perceptions that they were unmakeable and that the audience had lost interest in them.
Gladiator gave a big stamp of, good housekeeping stamp of approval on it's okay to do guys in skirts and spears, all right?
People loved big historical epics, provided that there was a story that was accessible and emotionally appealing.
Hollywood did them all the time, up till 40 years ago. Hadn't really touched it. And now we do come in and there's this big tough guy comes off and everyone seems to want to inhabit the world.
It was funny, within a few months of its success, there started to be a lot of stories in the trades about big development deals to do different kinds of Roman epics.
Yes, there hadn't been a Gladiator movie for 30 or 40 years, but there once was a time when these kinds of movies, not necessarily Roman, but kind of the big historical epic, was kind of the mainstay of Hollywood filmmaking, and the movies I grew up with, and the movies where they'd have intermissions, and they'd have overtures, and they'd give you those little booklets about them. And so the concerns we had were somewhat tempered with the belief that there was a reason why these movies were once really embraced by an audience. And there shouldn't be any reason why, if we did them well, particularly given that there are now digital technologies to truly render worlds in a way that they couldn't back then, why they couldn't be successful again.
The minute it was a huge success, what that tells the studio bosses is, oh, there is an audience for this kind of thing out there. Let's make more of it, which is what has happened since. The trouble is that making any good movie is very, very difficult. I think Gladiator found an audience because it's an excellent movie, not because it's about ancient Rome. I don't think you say, oh, that shows people want ancient Rome. No, what people want is great movies. I mean, I think that having seen Gladiator, people know that a big epic movie set in the past can be a lot of fun, but you've still got to honor that contract with the audience. You've still got to deliver them something that sends them out thrilled.
It's rejuvenated this historical epic, but I think its biggest impact was that it put a new spin on an old genre. This one place where Maximus is floating over the desert. I mean, it looks like the coolest Chanel commercial you could think of. You know, it's like great, and it gives a new way of looking at an old event.
One of the most exciting aspects of Gladiator is it's maybe my most successful version of a whole team working together. And in almost every aspect, the sum was greater than the parts.
Just on all these films, I learned more by the departments I've put together, who of course will go in and do all their research, and I get the brunt of all that research.
It was not the dry, historical world of history so much as it was the romantic ancient world of Byron and Shelley and Coleridge. A romance and a yearning for great men who did great deeds.
I think it's knowing in your mind how to inhabit that kind of world and that kind of environment. That goes right through to the costume, the armor, the length of a skirt on a man, the kind of swords, how they're made, the weight of the sword. The whole thing is a detailed exercise. Well, it's not an exercise, it's art, and it's fascinating.
There are some projects in which the artistic choice is the commercial choice. That the reason to do them is to try to somehow elevate the genre.
Gladiator just brought, through the music and through Russell's performance, certainly Pietro's cutting, the soulfulness of just Ridley approaching it with the hand in the wheat and the poetic vision there. It just brought a full package that was covering this whole thing in a new way, in a new and very, cinematically luxurious way that really gave people something different, gave a higher experience.
There's a central spiritual backbone to the movie, which I think really appealed to people. It reinforces the strength of all the characters.
It's one of those magnificent moments in someone's career where everything worked.